Teacher Talk, we're back with another episode on the Odyssey. What book are we on, Jay? I lost count.
This is very exciting. We're on book 5. We're abruptly shifting to a whole different place, plot, everything.
Oh, yes, book 5. That's a big shift. Big shift in the story. That's right. Okay, so if you haven't joined us yet, we've got 5 episodes. One introductory episode to the entire approach to the book that we're going to take, walking through the book, book by book by book, and then 4 other episodes, book 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we kind of walk through. They're all under an hour, and they go through what's important passages that you should pay attention to in the book, surprising passages to us, which I think sometimes have come with some good insights, into the story from Jay and I, who have been through this many times with students. So you get to think it through yourself over and over, but you also get to hear students say things, and they say interesting things. They draw your attention to places you might overlook. Right. So we're walking through them in that way, and then ending off always, with some questions that we have, things that linger for us in the chapters that we hope will be stimulating to readers at whatever level. If you're just digging into this, or if it's something you've read and it's just, you get that question you thought that you've just never thought of before, that resparks an interest in digging deeper into the story. So we'll continue with that approach tonight in book 5. Sea Nymph and Open Sea is the book title. In my translation, again, I'll be working from the Robert Fitzgerald translation. Jay,
I have the Emily Wilson translation. She titles it very similar, From the Goddess to the Storm. Basically the same
All right.
thing.
From the Goddess to the Storm, Sweet Nymph and the Open Sea is my title in book 5. Okay. But before we dig in,
you have a
what's
poem?
Up with the poem? Yes. I got a poem for today. I don't know how well known this author is, John Clare. He's a romantic poet from the Romantic era, dies mid 1800s, 1860s. I've read him a little bit, and I was reminded of a poem. I was flipping back through some collections I had, and here's a poem, and I think this may go decently with today's reading. So it's called "I Am" by John Clare. I am, yet what I am none cares or knows. My friends forsake me like a memory lost. I am the self-consumer of my woes. They rise and vanish, an oblivious host, like shadows in love's frenzied, stifled throes. And yet I am, and live like vapors tossed. Into the nothingness of scorn and noise, into the living sea of waking dreams, where there is neither sense of life or joys, but the vast shipwreck of my life's esteems. Even the dearest that I loved the best are strange, nay, rather, stranger than the rest. I long for the scenes where man hath never trod, a place where woman never smiled or wept, there to abide with my Creator, God, and sleep as I in childhood sweetly slept, untroubled and untroubled where I lie, the grass below, above, the vaulted sky. I Am by John Clare. And I think the loneliness expressed in this, the sense of being forsaken, reminded me of Odysseus at this point.
Oh my gosh!
In the story,
I've read a couple of his poems. I haven't read that one. I was thinking, other than the monotheistic reference, Odysseus could have thought all those things. Absolutely no problem.
Yes, that's exact. I was hoping you'd say something like that. It's exactly how it struck me when I read it again tonight. This castaway, really, and when we meet him in book 5, and I think that's the place to start here. Actually, with this book is we meet Odysseus in book 5. He's been talked about for 4 books. Referenced. We've heard his friends say exceedingly nice things about him. We heard Menelaus say, I'd clear out a whole town for him if he wanted to move out here with us. And and it's amazing. But Telemachus has sort of been our perspective on him, or our vision on him. He's only heard things about him. He's never met him. He doesn't know him. Just like the reader at this point.
Right.
So the
Yeah.
first time we meet him is in this book.
Yeah. And I just want to say too that it's not a bad idea if you're leading a class or a reading discussion or a reading group, exactly because of what you just said, Paul. We've heard about Odysseus. We haven't met him. And it's not a bad conversation, not a bad question to have people journal on it or just to discuss it, which is, what are you expecting when we meet him?
Yes.
Based on what we know, what are you expecting? Because even though we know some things, I don't think we're going to fully expect what we get in book 5.
Yes. And it yields some really interesting answers I've had from students over the years that, I've asked them to journal about that kind of question. What do you expect to find? Who's this superhero? And they have a superhero in mind, usually, if anything. And that's not what you get when you meet him in book 5 the first time. Not even close. And so it is nice. It is a good exercise to do, and to have students begin. It also encourages them to take this approach that I think Jay and I have mentioned over and over, which is to bring your authentic, genuine self to the book. This is a book for people. You are a people. Bring your human person to the book, and get yourself on paper. What do I expect from this? What am I thinking? And then test it against what you find.
Can I just say one quick thing on that? And Paul and I, unfortunately, we can talk about the book for a long time and then teaching for a long time. And we want this discussion to be sort of an organic hybrid of those two things. But I just want to say that I find that in teaching, and I probably have fallen into this trap, I think it's an easy trap. With modern books, it's easier, just superficially easier for kids to relate to them in certain ways. So often we'll ask, their sort of subjective opinion about those books. Whereas with canonical books, particularly old canonical books, they can be more museum pieces meant to be analyzed sort of like an insect under a microscope. And I think really good books written at any time should be dealt with both in an objective way and a subjective way. Because if it's a good book, it can be held to, we could like take our time with it and ask questions of it and analyze it. That's fine. But as you just said, just because it's 3,000 years old, or just because Shakespeare is 4 years old and Jane Austen is 3, doesn't mean there aren't human things in there that once you penetrate the externals, which are foreign, those human things are incredibly real. And I think this is just important if teachers are listening to this. Be okay with reader response subjectivity, because it's a great book and it almost doesn't matter what you talk about. Because it's all good, it's all rich, and it's all worth talking about. I had 2 classes today that discussed books 5 to 8, and I'm not going to dive deeply into what we talked about because we're just talking about that. But one class talked about book 5 almost exclusively, and another class talked about the relationship between manliness and humility. They were 2 utterly different focuses, and both were fine. And I think that's when people ask me like what I think a great book is. It's inexhaustible.
Yes.
And one of the characteristics is it's like a great record. You can listen to it over and over and over again, and there's always something new to discover. There's always something new to react to. We should dig into book 5, but I don't know. I think what you said was important.
No, that's good. That's good. And I like what you said too there. I mean, if whatever your students are talking about, if you haven't found it in the book yet, just keep looking. It's there. You just haven't seen it yet. It's almost never off topic. But
so you want to start with a summary, Paul?
What's that?
You want to start with a summary? Just a quick summary.
Yeah, why don't we do that? It's much shorter than book 4, which is nice. And it basically has 2 scenes, I think, maybe 3, I don't know. So the opening scene, we're back to the beginning of the book in the sense that we're back on Mount Olympus, right? Yep. So we're back up top with the gods. And that's I don't know if that's a little bit strange or not, but it starts off back there. And Athena is upset that her favorite Odysseus has not been released from the island yet. As you know, she comes back and says, "Didn't we all agree that he was going to be released?" And I went over and checked, and he's still there. That's not cool. Zeus is like, "Yeah, okay, well." Whatever, let's get it done. So Hermes calls Hermes over, his favorite son, sends Hermes down. Hermes, send the message. Go down and tell Calypso she's got to let him go. She can't flout the will of the gods. And so Hermes is, on the job, and so he shoots down and tells Calypso. Tells Calypso that she needs to let Odysseus go. So it's then we first meet Odysseus. What's he doing when we first meet him?
He's sad, Paul. He's crying on the beach.
He's crying.
As one of my guys said today, it's like he's at an all-inclusive resort in Aruba and he's still not happy.
Well, it's true, because Hermes is like taken back a little bit when he comes to the island. Like, wow, this place is awesome. He thinks it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Even to God's like, man.
In translation, even to a god it is.
Yes, yeah. So they're having a great time.
To be honest, it's an echo in Paradise Lost where Satan goes to Eden for the first time, pre-fallen Eden.
Yeah.
And I think Milton stole Satan's reaction to Eden from Homer. He's very similar. He's like, and he's an angel. He lived in heaven for a long time, and he's almost speechless in the face of such beauty.
Yeah, it's in this beauty. Well, it's like
the conversation between Calypso and Hermes we'll probably talk about is really, really interesting. She doesn't say, "Oh, whatever you want, whatever the male gods want is fine." That's a really interesting. That's a really interesting conversation. And like you said, meeting Odysseus on the beach. I don't think my students have generally expected him to be a puddle of tears right away.
Yeah. No, he's looking out at the horizon. He's mourning. He's I don't know. It almost reminds you of Telemachus. Telemachus is sitting back when we first meet Telemachus. He's sitting in the corner, just staring at the floor or whatever, and just destitute and almost just depressed, really. And that's how Odysseus is. So he needs to be bucked up too, like Telemachus was challenged.
Yeah.
So I think it is kind of surprising. So Hermes delivers the message, and he kind of wags his finger at Calypso and says, and next time, can the commentary just say yes, and we'll get into the commentary, that she, that she offers free of charge, and then she comes and lets Odysseus know. So as the chapter goes, she comes and lets Odysseus know that she's going to let him go, and she'll even help him out a little bit. He is suspicious. As we will find, he always is, but it's one of the first deep characteristics we come to find out about him, and it starts in the first time we meet him. So he's very suspicious, but she swears an oath, I won't play any tricks. I'll only help you as if it were myself. And she does. She helps him, sends him out, gives him directions, tells him how to navigate to get to the next closest land, and using the stars and whatever. And so he sets sail. By chance, as he's sailing away, his great nemesis is heading back from one of those awesome sacrifices where all the people are hepped up about you. They're slaughtering things and, pouring out blood, like every god wants. And he looks over and is like, what the? And there's who let him out? He's not supposed to be out here on the water. Then he puts it all together. It's all right. I see. I know what probably was happening up there in Olympus while I was gone, but why don't we just stir up some weather for him? So he's like, I guess I can't stop him from sailing away, but I can make it hard for him. So a big storm comes. Odysseus is overwhelmed, and he thinks he's going to die. And then he gets some help from Ino, which I want to talk about a little bit later. It's my sort of outstanding passage. Yeah. And also suspicious immediately, even though he's offered help while he's drowning. He turns over the decision of whether to accept this assistance in his mind. Decides to do it. Athena also shows up and helps out, quells the storm a bit. But he's tossed, turned, nearly dashed to pieces on the rocks of this land that he's heading for. But finally makes it, finds a little river inlet, and washes up into this inlet. Rolls himself up into the woods, into a bed of leaves, and sleeps. Sleeps. So he's away from the island. He's he suffers in the ocean on the way for a couple of days, and then finally he makes it to the island of the Phaeacians. These people he's going to Phaeacians, yeah, who he's going to spend some time with, and the plot will take off from there.
Right.
But that's kind of it.
Yeah, that's a good summary. And I just want to say that if it reminds you of book one, it's not a coincidence. I feel that book one is meant to introduce you to the epic scope of the story. You're in Mount Olympus, you're on various geographical places on Earth. There's all kinds of things, all kinds of characters. And you have that in book five as the poem. He sort of control alt deletes and resets everything in book five. And
Yeah.
it almost means, okay, remember, this is what Mount Olympus is and how they talk to each other. This is how gods talk to each other. This is how gods talk to mortals. This is how mortals talk to mortals.
Yes.
And then there's gods that are angry. There's gods that are supportive. There's travel. There's other lands.
Right.
So it's
Right.
it's a whirlwind. It's a whirlwind chapter, literally a whirlwind chapter.
Yeah. And there's a review Athena works in her complaint too. I noticed this just rhetorically, or like just as almost novelistically. She works in a review of all the bad things that are happening too. So she's almost monologuing about Odysseus is not released, and then his son is having he's confronted the suitors, and the suitors have plotted against him, and they're waiting for him to come back home, and they're going to try to assassinate him. So you get almost sort of a review of the story. There is this repetition, of the tale. As well, to remind you, what's going on since we've reset the story, like you say.
And it's also, you got to remember, this is a concert. I mean, this isn't a book originally, right? For a long time. So this is a performance piece, and there's a really good chance, just like a serial novel in the 19th century, there's a reset and some reminders, or like the next season of a show will often have I just rewatched West Wing for the third time. It's my favorite show of all time. And it's always previously on West Wing. I mean, they do that, right, in epic poems. And why? Well, because you're not reading 24 chapters in a night. The bard needs probably a cocktail and a nap after a little while.
Right.
So it makes sense, right? You'd restart. So anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
What's your essential? Do you want me to start, or do you want you to start with?
Yeah. Why don't you start? What do you have as the essence? Where do you go in this chapter then? So plot wise, it's fairly straightforward.
It is,
but where do you go as the essential section of this book, or this chapter?
I don't know. There's so many, but I'm meeting Odysseus, honestly. So I'm on in the Emily Wilson. It's line 151.
Okay.
And so she has just hesitatingly and begrudgingly agreed to give up Odysseus. And my students today chatted a lot about what does she really think of him? And is he a slave to her, powerless, or is he making a choice? And I did remember reading that her name in Greek means to hide or to cloak. So I wonder if that's like naming her that is Homer's as a signal that there's something dark and sinister, or intentional. So anyway, I don't know. I haven't thought through that. But anyway, around line 151, I'm just going to read a chunk. This is the setup and then meeting Odysseus. She found him on the shore. His eyes were always tearful. He wept sweet life away in longing to go back home, since she no longer pleased him, begging the question, was it 2 years, 5 years, 6 years? He had no choice. He spent it. So Emily Wilson says he has no choice. He spent his nights with her inside her hollow cave, not wanting her, though she still wanted him. But by day, he sat on the rocky beach in tears and grief, staring in heartbreak at the fruitless sea. If I remember correctly, Paul, that's the Chapman translation that moved Keats to write on looking into Chapman's Homer.
Oh, really?
Chapman translates it as his heart was soaked through, and Keats was so moved by that. I think that's that. So anyway, Calypso said.
Well, I'll say maybe on the Fitzgerald too with the compulsion thing. He uses compelled as well. Though he fought shy of her in her desire, he lay with her each night, for she compelled him.
Yeah.
So that's Fitzgerald.
And that's, I joked with my students, please don't try this with a future spouse. It doesn't, I'm guessing it probably, no, I was compelled. No, you weren't. And Calypso says pointedly to Odysseus, I am quite ready now to send you off. So I'm skipping to the next stanza. And here's
Gotcha.
we meet the hero, Odysseus, and I think this is the essential phrase. Informed by many years of pain and loss, shuddered and let his words fly out at her. He's just told the news he's been wanting. You can go. And the words are Odysseus's first words, Goddess, you have some other scheme in mind, not my safe passage. You're telling me to cross this vast and terrifying gulf in just a raft, when even stable schooners sped on by winds from Zeus would not succeed? No, goddess, I will not get on a raft unless you swear to me a mighty oath you are not planning yet more pain for me. So I mention that because it gives us an initial sort of, I don't know, psychology or emotional landscape of the guy that we're going to spend the most time with. That when you give him the best news in the world, he says, that's not real. I've recommended this book, and I really do. If you could only have a couple of books dealing with Homer, Jonathan Shea's work, the psychiatrist, I really recommend. And as I've said in other videos, he doesn't psychoanalyze Odysseus. He doesn't even say Odysseus has clinical PTSD. He doesn't say that. What seems to be clear is war trauma is a very particular thing, and there's some very human realities in it.
Yeah.
And Homer exposes it in brilliant ways. Here's what Jonathan Shea says about these moments. He says, although many of my current Jonathan Shea works with veterans with post-traumatic stress.
Okay.
Although many of my current patients have withdrawn from sex as part of withdrawing from social contracts altogether, some went through periods during the first decade after returning from Vietnam when they sought out the solace that Circe in book 10 and Calypso offer in sex. So that's just an interesting note that, like, the thing, if we're wondering, okay, 7 years, Paul, you and I are married and we have very nice wives. And if you and I want to go out for a beer, which we've done, we do that and it's fine.
Yeah. Right.
But the respectful thing to do in a relationship is to say, am I right? Hey, I'm going out with Jay. We're getting dinner. We're going to come back. If either of us came back 7 years later, there might be a little bit of a conversation. That probably wouldn't work. But what I find interesting is, and we had this conversation today, I had it with kids, is an acting conversation, actually, a theater question, which is, what kind of person says this? Very human question. I think if you're teaching, that's always a really good fallback. If you're dealing with spoken language in a text, you can just ask a human question. What kind of person says this? What kind of person says this to the greatest news he's ever heard?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a particular kind of brokenness, and we don't have to have a thesis statement in our back pocket. We're just meeting the guy, but it is a very particular, strong kind of brokenness that we're meeting here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're right to make this connection that this Shea is making. But it's always, I've been drawn to this also in another way, which is to ask exactly the same question you're asking, which I think this is the starting point for digging into this character's character. And it will pay for the rest of the book. You won't come to the end of it. What kind of a person? Exactly what you said. What kind of a person says this?
Yeah.
But I for me, I also want to put it into the context of his of not only his brokenness, but also of the things that he's praised for. He's praised for being cunning, for being clever, for being, well, he's put up in contrast to Agamemnon. Agamemnon's homecoming, and Agamemnon is singularly and catastrophically uncurious about what's going on at home, when he arrives. And that leads to his end.
Catastrophically uncurious is perfect.
Yes. And Odysseus isn't. He's always turning stuff over in his mind. He's always turning it over. So I think there's that edge, that side you're talking about of withdrawal, of brokenness. That is the position he's in when we meet him, after all. I mean, the line in Fitzgerald also is he's watching his life years just waste away.
Mhm.
And it's awful. It's just burning time. Um, but there is this, as we've heard him talked about, though, there's a positive side of this suspicion. I think maybe of his carefulness, of his sorting. He's always sorting things out. Um, and so I want to keep that bit alive too, because I think he's put forward to us as a I think I read him as he's put forward as a model in a sense. Do you? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think he's put forward as a noble model character in a way. Not
That's
perfect.
interesting.
He's absolutely flawed, but there's something that's supposed to be exemplary in
Yeah.
him.
I feel
Um,
this. I feel this way about Hamlet. And you and I have had Paul and I have spent numerous hours not doing schoolwork discussing these things.
yeah,
I maintain in their own way they are doing schoolwork, but I love reading about Hamlet and Odysseus, and I find them
yeah,
endlessly interesting. And if in Paul and I, you've talked about this. If you
yeah,
told me you have to teach the Odyssey and Hamlet for the next 30 years, no problem. I'd never be
yeah,
bored. I don't know if I'd want to know them in real
yeah,
life.
yeah.
Neither of those guys. I don't know if
It's
I'd
a
want
great
to
way of putting it.
know them.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah, they're frightening. I mean, they're
I think part
frightening in a way.
I think part of Odysseus's humanity and brilliance is he has these clearly natural gifts. He has Metis is his characteristic. Clever. It's not just he doesn't know data. It's he can get out of stuff. He's clever. And you know
Yeah.
what? If you're a warrior, you want him next to you. You absolutely do. I mean,
Yes.
no matter how great a warrior Achilles and Ajax are, the war doesn't end if it's not for Achilles. Odysseus isn't a great warrior. That's not
No.
what he's here for.
No. No. No.
So,
Right.
so he's a whole new kind of man in a poem
Yeah.
like this.
Yeah.
That being
Like Hamlet is.
like
Like
Hamlet is.
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, because Hamlet doesn't do what you're supposed to do. We learned this
right.
from the Odyssey. What you're supposed to do: come home and set things right,
Yeah,
slaughter, kill,
right.
fix. Hamlet is in Telemachus's shoes.
I'm gonna say
And
this.
yet,
I'm gonna say this now. We need a crossover podcast when we're done going through the Odyssey of because I think there's some really interesting echoes. There's
well, that's
no
true.
sense. There's no sense that Shakespeare knew Homer particularly well. He knew
Right.
Ovid really well, but I
Right.
don't know. I think there's some fascinating, just very human
No,
echoes.
you're right. No, I don't want to go too far down that path,
Yeah,
but I want to say that Hamlet is taken as both an awful person and an exemplary kind of eerily postmodern or contemporary
yeah,
character that you find back in the
100%.
1500s. And
Yeah,
and, and Odysseus is exemplary as well. And this cunning, it's a different kind of morality maybe than Western Christian morality. Well, definitely.
yeah,
But not all of this cunning, not all of this, as Fitzgerald has it in the opening line, skilled in all ways of contending, which
yeah.
is it's kind of a bland phrase, but it sort of gets at the point that he
Right,
can get out of any, and we'll see him angle for a
right,
blanket, later in the scene, right? He'll
right,
try to get a blanket, he'll try to get a drink of water. He'll try,
right,
so
right,
all from saving his life on the sea to breaching the walls of Troy to
right.
I'm going to see if I can get a heavier blanket for
Yeah,
he
and I
and
think
getting
it's
through awkward situations with people too, which he has here on this island,
yep,
so it's lots of different things. They're not all like bad self-serving,
sure.
skeevy salesman-y,
No,
techniques here.
absolutely not. And I just echoing off your really good question, I also think it's good at this stage of any book with students. They're going to make a lot of claims based on 21st century perspectives and personal
Yeah,
perspectives. And I don't shut them down, but at some point I'll say, okay, that's what you think a good person is.
yeah,
What does the book say a good person is? Because there's a
yeah.
chance that 3,000 years ago on the other side of the world, they thought differently than us. And let's be okay with that. From what I've read, scholars are very clear that in the Homeric universe, greatness has nothing to do with morality. It's just an attribute that you live out.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
if Odysseus is cleverness and Odysseus kills a lot of innocent people, he rapes people, like does all these things that are war crimes, literally. But
yeah.
in ancient Greece, they're not. So that's
Right.
in the universe he lives in. there's a different moral structure. And
Yeah.
I don't want my students to feel like they have to read all kinds of second material to figure that out. What's clear in the book is he's revered and really screwed up. So
Yeah.
something about him being screwed up doesn't make him not revered.
Yeah.
So
No.
that's worth
And
wrestling
also
with.
there's this, like, you can kind of try to make a list. Like, it seems like Odysseus did sleep with this, had this affair. So you're going to put that out there as a moral, a moral hazard, in his life. But it doesn't turn out to be, I don't think, for him. And what I take from his morality is that, and there's always a contrast. There are always the suitors to contrast to. There are bad, sort of clearly, sort of black and white, bad and good characters in the book, as well as these complicated ones. But you can always compare to the suitors. The suitors are just angling for another sexual encounter constantly, and for more food, for more pleasure, for more leisure. Odysseus did this with Calypso, and this one's kind of complicated because it says she compelled him. But here's the thing: in his heart, all right, he's always longing for a home and wife. I mean, he's literally looking out to the horizon. I assume for a ship that he might scurry out to before Calypso notices. And then, speaking of awkward moments, Calypso's going to ask him point blank before he leaves, "Are you kidding? Look at this. I'm a goddess, and I'll make you immortal. Who is this woman that you can't stop thinking about, that you want to get back? She's going to be a whole lot older, and that means wrinkles, and she's not going to look like me and all this, right?" So Calypso lays that out. But I think the thing that might ring true to our own, morality is that there is a dedication to his wife that he never gives up on, even to the point of sacrificing what most people would call great privileges or goodnesses to get.
No, that's good.
But I think, and the thing is, and I'll work this into my part on this, is I really like the line is that and this is what I can't get over in Odysseus, and I don't want to, but I can't get over it, is his deep, and this sounds corny to say, but sort of deep, authentic humanity. But it comes out in lines like this: when Calypso offers him immortality and never-ending pleasures and joys with her, essentially paradise. And he says no, not because he wants to go to hell, but because he's a human being who wants to be a human. She says, when you leave this island, it's going to be suffering and toil and trials. Yeah. He says, bring it on. Bring it on, And it's true suffering. It's not like bring it on and like he's out there about to die and he loves it, he's like I was picturing that character in Dr. Strangelove riding the bomb down, like, no. It's not fun for him, right? Yep. But it's true suffering. But it matches skill to challenges, to life, to troubles, and that's what he's up for. That's what he wants. So he's not looking for a retirement facility, with a golf course within walking range.
Oh, I'm a golfer. He would cheat his butt off. I played with guys like him.
No. He would win, Jay. He's a winner. Okay.
Yeah, but he'd have a pencil with an eraser. I know those guys. What's your essential quotation, Paul, or did you kind of weave it in just now?
Well, kind of. But let me pick up on the quote that you made. I want to tie it to another one. So I was going to do one of those cheat quotes. It's really two quotes. So my quote, spanning 30 pages, is that scene you brought up, where we first meet Odysseus and Calypso offers to let him go, and he says, "Yeah, what's up here? I don't believe you. What are you plotting, against me?" And she's like, "Wow," and she kind of laughs. It takes her. She's like, "Man, for you to shake me down for a promise, before you go out, I got to tell you, that's something." And then I like to match that with a scene a little later, right before the end of the book, when he has a similar experience with Ino. Yeah. So from the plot, he's within sight of land, and but the waves are so high, his raft has been crashed and crushed. He's hanging onto a board for dear life, and he's pretty sure he's going to drown. In the Fitzgerald translation. It's on this line 370 in the Fitzgerald translation. And as he's in the water, then a sea nymph, Ino, saw him, Cadmus's daughter, slim-legged, lovely, once an earthling girl, now in the seas, a Nereid. Touched by Odysseus' painful buffeting, she broke the surface like a diving bird to rest upon the tossing raft and say, and then she gives him some hope. It says, "Oh, I see Poseidon's after you. He's not going to kill you. Don't worry about it. But here, take this veil." So she has this sash or this veil that she says it's not mortal. And if you tie it around your waist and wear it, you won't drown. And then you can just leave this wreckage, swim for shore. You'll be fine. Most people would say, thank the gods, take that veil and swim for it. But he doesn't do that. Right. After she bestowed her veil, the Nereid dove like a gull to windward and disappears. But in perplexity, Odysseus said to himself, his great heart laboring, "Oh, damned confusion. Can this be a ruse to trick me from the boat for some god's pleasure? No. I'm not going to swim. With my own eyes, I saw how far the land lies that she calls shelter. Better to do the wise thing as I see it. While this poor plank holds, I'll stay aboard of it and ride it." So he just hangs on. So it's a similar case to the one that you brought up, and I think it's essential because, again, it's striking a similar note that rings out about this character of Odysseus. And as I think about it, I'm interested in what are these gods? What do they mean? What does it mean that a Nereid appears? It's fine on a mythological level. I can take the story at that level. It's enjoyable enough. But you also want to think about it. And I think also if you're teaching this to students, it's a good way to drive into it, to try to draw them into the story in a deeper way and say there may be some insight into human nature or insight into what it means to be a person in the world in these mythological tellings. And so I'm interested in that. And I see in Odysseus someone who is who in his troubles and trials doesn't try to just get out of them or avoid them, but kind of stews in them and takes them for what they are and tries to understand them and part of the nature of them. And I think this Ino character is a way of understanding the nature of the situation that he's actually in. Right. It's a way of calming and saying, am I going to die here? I'm not going to die here. If he's careful, if he's calm, but there's no way out. There's no trick. There's no Deus ex machina in this. He still has to think and do the smart thing, which
there's a little Deus ex machina. I mean, literally a god comes out of nowhere, but he's fated to make it home. And the landscape that was made clear on the first page of the manuscript, right? I mean, he's fated to make it home. There was going to be something was going to get him. So I thought you said something important too about the parallel between this and the Calypso paranoia when she gave him good news. I think it's important that Ino exists to show us that this is who Odysseus is. This isn't Odysseus having a little moment with his girlfriend. This is anytime someone offers good news, but it presumes your capacity to trust. Like a lot of people who have suffered war trauma, trust does not come easily to him.
Yeah, that's right.
Part of me thinks, and it's early to say this, but when he introduces himself, the times he does it honestly, ironically, it's as a liar and a trickster. So does he know that from his perspective, maybe, wouldn't anybody say anything to get what they want? I mean, why wouldn't?
Yeah.
That's who I am, and that's the prism through which I see reality.
So it doesn't everyone else. Yeah.
Right. I'm not going to automatically trust some sea goddess who randomly shows up throwing me a life raft. Like, no.
Yeah. No,
absolutely not. So I think it's important because it takes that tendency out of one moment in book 5 and it makes it actually just, no, this is a part of who he is regardless of context.
Yes. And so totally, there is that. But each time you think something's going to come and maybe just save him, it doesn't. Like, he still has to think it through and work it out and,
Mhm.
and stress over it and turn it over. And he's confused. He doesn't know the right answer, but he does. And I mean, I like the line says, I may ride out the pounding of the storm, or if this wood cracks up, take to the water then. I can't think it through a better way. So it's still on him to. I can't figure out a different way. He doesn't just take like you said. Doesn't
Yeah.
just take her word for it. There's no way out like that. So he keeps going with it, and then he's smashed, and he loses and he's swimming. Then all of a sudden, and he
Mhm.
keeps the sash on, and he does make it, and he unties it, releases it back into the ocean, and it goes back to back to Ino. So in a way, it works, but it's not like magic. It's not a spell that he just
Yeah.
conjures up and poof, he's
Uh,
on the island now.
I just want to throw this out too, and I know you like concepts like this. Sometimes, even with little, young students, they can get surprisingly philosophical, and the whole question in epic poetry, uniquely in epic poetry, um, of the relationship between fate and free will, or the will of the gods and free will, which isn't the
Mm,
same thing, is really interesting. And this is definitely the case in Beowulf. And there's articles called um, The Essential Paganism of Beowulf, The Christian Coloring of Beowulf. Scholars don't
yeah,
agree. It's a Christian thing
yeah,
with
yeah.
pagan dressing, a pagan thing with Christian dressing. But the best thing I've read, and this could be said of this moment exactly as you described it, is I think, and we don't have to like this. This is the world of the poem that we have to honor, that it's a world that believes in fate that's immovable. The gods have to believe in fate. The gods are succumb to it.
Mm,
And your response to that, which is a choice, is also important and could be heroic. So you could live in a world prescribed by fate and somehow be a hero within it.
mm.
It seems
And
that way.
yeah, and doesn't that like it's not a bad answer to a really hard theological question, you
Right.
know? The the Calvinists try to solve this thing, in Christian theology, and, and
Mhm.
and what they're trying to resolve is exactly this dynamic that the world there must be some kind of trajectory to it. There seems to be some kind of fate as we experience. If you're just being honest, there seems to be a direction to it. However, or if you believe in an all-powerful God, how can you think there isn't one? How could God not already know and already have it laid out if he's
Right.
omniscient and all powerful and all that? He's got to.
Right.
However, how can you also not experience yourself as a chooser? We really do. We really deeply, deeply experience ourselves as choosers. We take responsibility or fail to take responsibility for our choices and think that that's morally significant, no matter how much we try to get out from underneath it. And if you just
Right.
take those two forces, they're very difficult to put together. And
Right.
this putting together at least acknowledges both of them and gives a way of sewing them together.
Yeah,
That's
I think that's good, and I think it's one of those moments, and we had one today where it's like I want to listen to what the my students are thinking conceptually, and then I just want to bring them to a place where they enter the poem openly.
yeah,
You know, so we can go down the rabbit hole philosophically on the fate free will thing as it
yeah,
exists.
no,
That should be a separate podcast, frankly, because
yeah,
it's vital to how you read the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Aeneid, Paradise Lost, Beowulf, all those books,
yeah,
because if they're mere puppets or chess pieces, it's just not worth reading. But if they're
yeah,
also, if the gods are powerless, the poems aren't worth reading. So it's really messy. But I like students to sort of soak in the messiness of it rather than try to create a trite
yes,
solution, because clearly
yes.
there's nothing trite happening here.
Right. And for that connection, as you said, sometimes it's superficially more easy for students to read contemporary books. But what's really, really pleasing about the older books is whenever you find something you recognize in it. And so maybe this conundrum, maybe some students would be familiar with from their own
Yeah,
church attendance or whatever. And for them to say, what? The Greeks also had
right.
this problem?
Well,
It's interesting.
this is a really serious example. I had a chat with a student today whose father's dying of cancer, and he's had it for a long time. And it's the
Mm,
kind of cancer that's not caused by, like, he didn't smoke for a million years. It was random, you
yeah.
know, and he's terminal. And
Mm,
we were talking about a toned down version of what our the conversation we're having. And this little guy just said, well, my father's been really like heroic in the face of this. I mean, he said something like that, and there it is. That's it.
Yeah.
It's completely fated, predetermined, random, whatever word you want to ascribe to it, but it wasn't a choice that led to this guy who's about to die and leave a family. Yet, within that world of randomness and fate, here he is behaving in it.
Man, the great example.
Right.
It's so real, and it. And how great for this student to mythologize that in a way, because it's very personal and painful for him. Isn't it nice to have a version of it that's mythological that he can deal with? That will inform probably what he's going through, with his own family. It's fantastic.
Yeah. We're going on and on. There's a lot to discuss here. I'm going to give just a quick surprising quotation. I'd like a lingering question to chat about that.
Let's do that.
So I'm really interested in the building of the raft, and I told my students one of their homework questions was, why do you think a page is dedicated to like all the tools that are provided? And it's like HGTV, but in Homer. Like it's really deliberately and thoughtfully done. And in fact, another book that I've mentioned, Why Homer Matters by Adam Nicholson, he says in that book, and I think this is true, nothing in the Odyssey is described with more love or care than Odysseus making his raft. So I said to students, anytime you're reading a book and there's something that looks like it doesn't belong there, or the author's spending way more time than necessary, it's either a flaw, which sometimes happens, or he's up to something. Presume he's up to something. So we had a conversation. Most kids wanted to talk about why didn't Odysseus just stay with Calypso? It's crazy.
Yeah.
Can I weave in my lingering question here? Do I have permission to do? Because it connects to this.
All right. We'll let you. Yes.
Because my lingering question is that I want to echo what my guys were asking today. I teach at a boys' school. Why is he not making what looks to be just so the obvious choice? And we ended up having a conversation about the fact that they looked at it as a Calypso Penelope choice.
Okay.
And I said, when you're married, strangely enough, and I'm going to be quiet because my wife's 2 floors away, your marriage isn't your entire life. What else is Odysseus's? What else is Odysseus's life? And I just said, let's make a list on the board of everything he's done, everything he is, everything he's good at. Here's what we realized. He can exercise none of his skills and talents with Calypso on Ogygia. None. Like he's known for cleverness. No need for it. It's perfect. It's Eden before the fall. It's prelapsarian Eden, right? And how much of this is like what we see when someone retires too early and they have no identity and are lost? This was my dad, actually. He retired, Paul. Ready for this? 51 years old.
What?
He worked for the Department of Defense and he had military service. So he had 33 years.
Oh my gosh.
He was lost, like a lot of people when they retire anyway. It's hard. It's a shift, right? But like we had this conversation about, it's not just about which woman you want to be with. It's who do you want to be? And when he goes home, he has people to manage and domestic things to solve and families to raise. And that's messy and crazy. But, it's sort of like, one kid made the analogy to quarantine. It's like being in a resort, but you're quarantined there for a long time. It isn't like I'm choosing to go on vacation. It's vacation at gunpoint for 7 years.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it is internal. It isn't simply like, which girl do I like more? Like he's not an adolescent,
Right.
It's right. I'm not the man I'm meant to be here. And I think this comes up when he's in the next few chapters, and I'm going to make reference to it, where he tells a new character what he thinks the ideal marriage is. And that's something that we'll have to talk about. And I think that connects. So that's my surprising moment, the raft thing. Like, how badly does he want to get home? Like, he's really taking his time. Which, like I said, leads to the lingering question. What's at home outside of like a woman who's aged versus this goddess and whatever else?
Yeah.
What else is there for him? His identity's there. The things he's good at are there.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just want to throw that out as
that's
a thing.
Great. That is great stuff. That's it. That's better said version of what I was trying to say. He wants to be a human. He's a human being, and you put it in terms of like skills and
Yeah.
work and trouble, trials and tribulations are they are a way of being a person. You navigate
Yeah.
those things, you fix those things, you work your way through them. But all the working and fixing and navigating, that's all being alive. That's being a human being. And he doesn't. The thing I like is he doesn't want a way out. He's not looking for a back door to sneak out. And I think our students, are young enough, some of them to think that you could find that in some abstraction, in
Mm,
some highly abstract form of beauty you'll just retire into, or
yep.
some abstract form of life that's just, a perfect version of everything, of a house and of relaxation and it's not. They're all forms of death, is what they are. They're
Yep.
forms of death. And to go back to your example of retirement, a lot of people die too early, too young, because they retire so young, and there's nothing to live for anymore. It's a
Right.
form of death, but it's sold as, or it's easy to think of it
Yeah.
as a form of of pleasure or life at the highest. Ironically. So that's
Yeah.
good. That's good. My surprising my surprising moment is also a cheat, because it's a series of moments. You know what I noticed in this, and you said this earlier here in this episode, that book five is kind of like a reset. And things that stood out to me in this book five that are different than in the previous books, I think, is kind of the writing. So I wrote down three
Epic stuff.
beautiful images.
Oh yeah.
The imagery in the story. One, um, there's when right before Odysseus makes it onto land, he sees that he's going to make it. He sees the
Yes.
land. There's this image of it. The poet says, "Do you know how a child feels when his parent has been very, very sick for a long time, like they're going to die, like their dad's going to die, and then the father gets better, and how great it is to see them strong again." That's how Odysseus felt when
Yeah.
he saw the land. So in the metaphor, the land is the father that's been missing. The child is Odysseus. He's a child of the land, and he's happy to see it again. It's refreshing and comforting. It's a nice figure. Also, when he was trying to keep himself from being dashed on the rocks, there's just a little moment thrown in there.
That's the octopus one.
About the octopus, yeah.
Love it.
Where does that come from? All of a
Love it.
sudden, there's this. You know how when you're ripping an octopus out of the ocean,
Oh
and,
yeah.
and little rocks are stuck into its suckers? It
Isn't that
says
the worst
it's.
of all?
They had octopuses back then. They lived
Well,
the
they had
stories of the real
calamari. How
world.
else you get calamari? I mean,
Exactly. So it's this crazy little moment, and then you picture Odysseus's hands. He's hanging on, trying to hang on the rock when the waves are washing him back out, and he leaves parts of his sucker grippers on the rocks. Pulled
yeah,
out. The final one is what the book closes with, and it's
yeah.
a beautiful little image there of fire, and it's a great little scene. He's called a hidden brand in a bed of embers. He says, how people want to hide their fire, keep a brand of fire, a little coal alive in your fire. So you'll bank the fire, pour some ashes over the coals, and keep it alive for the next morning. That's what Odysseus was.
Yep.
He was rolled up, banked, with a little bit of heat, just still cooking there, almost dead,
Barely
almost
there.
out, kept through the night. So those are those are surprising moments in the story for me. Nice writing. You
Can
just
I
get for
throw
free.
something out that you taught me just now? I'd never made this connection.
What's that?
But Jane Austen perfected in her writing something called free and direct discourse, and it's when the narrator ends up embodying the thoughts and feelings of the character, and it's really weirdly
Huh.
modern and funky. And she's the master of it. It sounded like what you were
I
just
never heard of
describing.
that.
Yeah, free and direct discourse, and but it sounded like exactly what you were just describing. That maybe I'm just thinking out loud here, but listening to you, maybe when Homer wants us to really be inside of a character's head, one of the ways he does that is with epic similes.
Hmm.
It's as
Hmm.
if it's like when you see land for the first time, or um, you know, there's a really disturbing one coming up really quickly, and there's the one you
Yeah.
just said about about when a kid sees a parent that, I mean, that's a way to get inside his heart in a really inventive, poetic manner. Maybe that's what's going on there. That's kind of, I never thought of that. I could be totally
Yeah.
wrong.
I can look at that. I wrote that down, the free and direct discourse. I haven't heard that phrase used, but it kind of stands out, in the
Yeah.
book. It again is literary, and you don't think of this as almost like written literary, but as you pointed out, it's an oral story, but it goes a little bit further than it has to create the scene,
Yeah.
and it's nice.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're kind of at the end here. I don't have to develop this, but it is a question I'll throw out there. My surprise or my lingering question part about this has to do with the gods again, and this is something I think again as you're teaching this or digging through it and trying to take it, as it's given. I don't know if I understand the pettiness of the gods. So that comes out here. I know you wanted probably to talk about, and maybe we will another time, the Calypso's complaint about how the gods can all have their affairs, but how come she can't have hers?
Right.
She's enormously petty. Zeus is enormously petty, and there's a tiny bit of pettiness, at the beginning of this book from Zeus. Hermes, I guess, but I don't definitely with Poseidon. I don't know what that means. Why are the gods being painted this way?
I wonder, Paul, I think I would go so far as to say that at this stage of the poem, any reader has to ask that question. And I wonder, again, never having thought this until you just said what you just said, are the gods an immortal version of men insofar as it has nothing to do with moral goodness? It's excellence of attribute. And gods have these attributes, whether it's speed or cunning or warfare or craftsmanship or whatever.
Wow.
They're really good at that. They don't have to be good morally. That's not the point. I wonder if that's really what's happening. The problem, though, becomes, particularly if you're from like a Judeo-Christian landscape where even in the parts of the Bible where God really doesn't look that good when he's like killing innocent babies and stuff.
Yeah.
The belief is God is good and powerful and all-knowing. He's those three
That's
things
right.
all. But when you're dealing with gods who are in discord and gods who are moody and temperamental and gods who have all these different talents, man, if you're an ancient Greek in this poem, that's a tough gig. You just have to like really hedge your bets and take your chances. And
Yeah, it's a good way to approach that. I've heard versions of this like the gods are just like enhanced humans or something. But to say that if we're saying that at essence humans morality is excellence or arete, in these character traits, that maybe these are just that taken to an umpteenth degree or a really extreme degree where they have excellence divorced from I don't know what, a body or something. I don't know what it is, but it could be. That's an interesting way to think of it.
I'm not
But
sure.
yeah, I throw that out there. I think it is something you're confronted with. It's fair to ask, and I don't know if you can get an answer to it. Maybe you can, if you pursue it. But it's there. Okay,
That's
so
a good chat, Paul. We got a lot.
yeah,
I mean,
I
there was
think
a
that
lot
gets us.
discussed there.
Yeah, that gets us there. We've left Telemachus behind. Book 4, he's idling over here in the plot, and we've picked up Odysseus. So we're going to ride with him for a while.
I'm going to tease book 6 right now. You want me to tease book 6?
All right, let's hear it.
We're going to appeal to a market that we've not appealed to yet. We're going to appeal to the market that loves to do laundry. You're out there. People that want to make sure things are done and folded and the colors are with the right colors. All that. This next chapter is the most famous chapter in all of literature about laundry, maybe outside of A Moment in Othello. All right, but the act of doing laundry. If you're like my Nana,
Wow.
I'm drinking ginger ale in honor of my Nana.
Yeah,
my Nana would have been all about book 6.
Yeah, if she would have, and here's a shameless plug for subscribing to our channel. She would have subscribed to the channel after book 6.
Yeah, she's not with us yet.
No,
she's not with us yet, but you're doing laundry. She would have liked the feast scenes too, because eating at her house was similar to that.
Oh, yes. Well, this may be our big breakthrough then, Jay. I can't wait to see how many laundry people we get listening.
Awesome.
Well,
awesome.
Jay,
hey, thanks
that was
all for the chat.
Yeah, Yeah, that was great. I really enjoyed that. I appreciate it. And we'll see you next time on book 6.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too.